Hey boys, it's Arm9. Today we're going to be going over 10 things that you should never buy in Grand Theft Auto Online, or at least you should wait until you're very far into the game before you buy these 10 things. So that's it for the intro. Let's get into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with number 10. So guys, at number 10, the first thing on the list that you should never buy in Grand Theft Auto Online are most of the boats. Now, boats go for an absolute ton of money in Grand Theft Auto Online. As you guys can see, simply scrolling through Doctees, you can see just how much these things are. I mean, 2 million, 1.25 million, 1.75 million. The dinghy, pretty cheap. And of course, the Kraken is free, so go ahead and get that. But for the most part, these boats are all kind of expensive, except for obviously like the Sea Shark, the Tropic, and the Sun Trap. But the other ones are all way overpriced, and there's something that you should never buy. This is the Kurtz 31 patrol boat, I believe it is, and since the Cayo Perico heist has come out, I have never once used this thing other than to make a video about it when it first came out. The patrol boat, and pretty much all the other boats in Grand Theft Auto Online, are very useless. Now don't get me wrong, you can have fun with a boat, you can take it out, you could go sailing with it, you can bring some friends along for the ride, but as far as helping you in the game, boats a lot of the time I find are pretty much entirely useless. You know, that's not to say that I hate them, or that I dislike them even, but for the average player in Grand Theft Auto Online, especially if you're new and just starting out in the game, boats are going to be a pretty massive waste of time for you. So that's it for the first thing that you should probably not buy in Grand Theft Auto Online, at least if you're a new player. Let's move on to the next one. At number 9, we have useless clothing items. Now don't get me wrong, you gotta be dripped out, you gotta be icy, you gotta be fly in GTA. As you guys can see, obviously, you know, drip god me, I'm not too worried. For a lot of people, clothes are such a waste of money. You should have a few outfits that you like that you can switch around in GTA. Don't get me wrong, don't just hold on to all your money, you gotta spend some of it, right? But as you guys can see, I mean, this bomber jacket is $20,000. Now 20 grand, not exactly a lot of money in online, it is kind of substantial, and if you went and bought all of these jackets, that is going to cost you a ton of money. And realistically, you're probably not gonna wear more than half of them. Now where it gets really expensive is when you go to the outfits. As you guys can see, a simple outfit like this costs $40,000, which is crazy. And it does occasionally get even worse than this. Scuba suits are about $160,000, however these are actually worth owning because they do something for you. Scuba suits allow you to swim under the water for as long as you want, and they also come equipped with flippers which help you swim faster under the water, so these are actually worth it to own. However, Tron suits that cost $200,000, while they do look pretty damn cool, they're $200,000. Now that, for a lot of people, that's not going to be a lot of money. There's going to be a bunch of guys in my comments saying, oh man, I've got all the Deadline suits and I don't even care. Like, who cares? But for the majority of people, spending $200,000 on a Deadline suit is probably not the best use of your money. However, again, there are good clothing items to buy. For example, bulletproof helmets. These actually do work, and they allow you to take a few more headshots from ARs, pistols, SMGs, shotguns, all of that sort of stuff, even heavy snipers and marksman rifles. And of course, you can go even further than that and get yourself a helmet with a lens on it, and these allow you to activate night vision and thermal, which is pretty crazy. So these are definitely worth picking up, and in addition to that, they also do protect your head. So just be responsible with your money when it comes to buying clothes. These can add up to a lot of money, and most of the time it is probably not worth it. However, make sure that you stay dripping because you don't want to look broke. I mean, obviously, come on now. That's it for number 9, on to number 8. Up next, we have high-end apartments. Now don't get me wrong, high-end apartments can be useful, and I want to make that perfectly evident. You do get garage space with these things, and you are able to launch the OG heists. However, what I don't like about high-end apartments is these things do cost quite a lot of money. As you guys can see, if I scroll through the high-end apartments on Dynasty 8, they cost in the high hundreds of thousands and in some cases even in the millions. Now this is an absolute ton of money for a place that only has a 10-car garage. Now my real beef with high-end apartments is instead of buying high-end apartments to get your garage space, if you don't already own one, you can buy a CEO office. Now CEO offices, they do go for a little bit more money. However, you can use the CEO office to make money, and you don't need to rely on anybody else like you do with the original heists. With the original heists, you do need 4 players in order to play them. However, with the CEO office, if you get CEO cargo or vehicle cargo, for example, you can run them completely by yourself. And within CEO offices, you can also get up to a 60-car garage, and these things will cost a combined total of way less than high-end apartments for 60-car garage spots. Now obviously, if you already have a CEO office and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to buy another one. You can only own one of these, and that's where high-end apartments come in. That's when you should buy high-end apartments. Now obviously, these places do have unique interiors, and some of the places are better looking than others. For example, I actually completely forgot what this stilt house looked like because I never come here and I never go inside any of these places. They are pretty cool. However, like I said, I never come here and I never use the interior of this place, like literally ever. So while it is cool to have, it's not really worth it. Really, the only thing that makes these places worth anything is the ability to launch the heists from them and the 10 garage slots that you get. So that's pretty much it for number 8. Let's move on to number 7. The next thing that you should never buy in Grand Theft Auto Online, and this is one of the ones that you should never buy under any circumstance pretty much, is of course the document forgery MC business. Now I unfortunately bought myself a document forgery office and I have fully upgraded it. And even with the boost that businesses got from the expanded and enhanced update to Grand Theft Auto Online, this one is still absolutely not worth running, even though I actually do. Now if I enter into the computer here, you guys will be able to see that I have done $5,544,000 off of 39 sales. However, even with a full stock, you only get $315,000 for selling this. Now keep in mind that the supplies do cost money in order to get them. I do not run supplies myself. So it's going to cost 75 grand and then another 75 grand and then another 75 grand in order to fill this thing all the way up. And of course you only get 315 for the sale mission. So you do the math on that, and it is profit, but it's not much profit. So it's not super worth running. Now there is one slightly redeeming factor about owning the document forgery office. This is of course only if you own a nightclub in Grand Theft Auto Online, and if you more importantly have a nightclub basement. Now the nightclub basement can make you an absolute ton of money in Grand Theft Auto Online, and part of the money that it can make you has to do with document forgery. Now within your warehouse, you can assign technicians to accrue certain goods for you, and they will do this completely passively. However, you need to own all of the businesses in order to do this. So of course, if you do own the document forgery office, you can acquire printing and copying things and then use them to sell certain special orders, and you can make a little bit more money with them. However, they don't come up that often, and I'm not 100% convinced that they're even worth going for, because you still have to own the document forgery office, which is just kind of an L, to be honest. But I figured that I would mention this because for some people it does make owning document forgery worth it. However, I would advise you to probably stay away from this one. And if you do buy it, I would advise you to probably not upgrade it. Unless you actually plan on running document forgery, then you should upgrade it, but I would just advise avoiding it altogether. That's it for number 7. Let's move on to number 6. The next thing that we're going to be talking about are useless and excessive upgrades. Now I'm going to show you what I mean by this. Now when you go to buy a property in Grand Theft Auto Online, for example, the CEO office, when you are selecting all the things that you want in it, you will have the ability to do things like this. For example, the gun locker within the CEO office. If you add this, it's going to cost $520,000. Now the gun locker is not bad. It allows you to have a custom loadout, which is pretty useful. But then there's upgrades like the safe. And the safe costs 335 grand and literally does absolutely nothing. You can open it, you can look at the money that you've made inside of it, but you cannot collect anything from it or do anything with it. In addition to that, buying accommodation at certain properties is 100% not worth it. Say you own Mazebank West, well, if you also own the Del Perro Heights apartment right across the street, why would you pay almost $800,000 for the accommodation just to be able to spawn in your CEO office when you could just spawn at Del Perro Heights and run across the street? It's not really worth the $800K. Another example that I'm going to give here is if you have the gun locker, you do not need to buy it in any other business. So if you have the gun locker in the CEO office, you really do not need to buy the gun locker within the bunker. Although the bunker's gun locker is a lot cheaper, so if you have a bunker, I'd say go for it in the bunker instead of the CEO office because it's way cheaper. Another example of this is if you have a Terabyte and you have a weapon workshop inside of it, you do not need to put a weapon workshop inside of your Avenger. As you guys can see, I've obviously done it anyways, but you should probably avoid doing this because it can save you an absolute ton of money. Same with buying a vehicle workshop in your Avenger. If you got one in the Avenger, you don't need to buy one within the MOC. or vice versa, of course. If you keep track of all this stuff, it is a really good way to save some of your money on things that you really do not need. So that's it for number 6. Let's move on to number 5. Next up at number 5, of course, we have the yacht. I'm sure every single one of you is probably expecting this thing to be on this list at some point. You're probably expecting it to be a little bit higher on this list though, and there are a couple of reasons why it is not. Now, yachts go from anywhere from $6 million to $10 million depending on the yacht that you get and the upgrades. Now, certain models like the Aquarius and the Pisces come with a helicopter on board your yacht. However, the regular Orion does not come with that. Also, the Aquarius comes with an assortment of boats around it, and so does the Pisces. Now, these are overpriced no matter how you slice it, but at least with some of the yachts you get access to a free in quotation marks, helicopter, and a bunch of free in quotation marks, boats. On top of this, if you register as a SecuroServe CEO, you can of course do piracy prevention from your yacht. However, you need to be in a session with other players. Now, piracy prevention does pay semi-decently. It pays about $25,000 to $30,000 for 10 minutes of your time, which, yeah, you could make more money, but at least you can make something with the yacht, so that is good, I guess. In addition to that, of course, there are the Super Yacht Life missions as well, which are kind of lame and they don't really pay that much money, so they're pretty much something that should be avoided. Overall, I'd say the yacht is absolutely not worth owning. However, it's not exactly the worst purchase that you can make in online. It's a very bad one, but it is not the worst. So let's move on to the next one. Next up at number 4, we have the Avenger. Now, this one is surely going to piss quite a few people off. However, let me get into it. The Avenger goes for between $3.4 million and $4.8 million, which is not cheap by any means. And in addition to that, you will also need to own a facility, and facilities go for anywhere from $1.8 million up to like $3 million. And with upgrades and all that stuff, it can get really, really expensive. Now, the Avenger is kind of a good vehicle. It is one of the fastest aircraft in online. However, I feel like it is semi-pointless to own. Basically, the Avenger and the MOC have the exact same function. You can have a vehicle and weapon workshop within either of them. The Avenger obviously flies, and the MOC, of course, drives. Now, in order to own the MOC, you're going to need to own the bunker, and the bunker, in my opinion, is a much more useful building to own than the facility, because the bunker can make you money and you can also do research with it. So it's semi-passive, which is really nice, whereas the Doomsday Heist is all you. You have to run through it, you have to run all the setups, run through the actual heist in order to get paid, and I believe with the Doomsday Heist you do need at least one friend as well. It's more expensive, and the money that it makes you is less efficient, I would say. Now, the reason that I say the Avenger is not worth buying is because this thing also has a few issues. For example, the Avenger suffers from the same armor glitch as the Kasatka. If you guys have seen the Kasatka, sometimes the Kasatka can take around 20 Oppressor Mark II missiles, and other times it will be insta-killed by a missile. Now, the Avenger is unfortunately kind of the same way. The Avenger's armor is completely glitched, and sometimes this thing will blow up after only a few hits from an RPG, whereas other times it'll last for like forever. Now, this is not to say that the Avenger is completely terrible, it's just a little bit inconsistent, which is inherently quite annoying actually. Now, another problem with the Avenger is instead of the Avenger, like I said, you can own the MOC, and the MOC, although it is stuck on the ground and cannot fly and doesn't have access to bombs, the MOC cab is the most armored vehicle in all of Grand Theft Auto Online, taking about 70 homing missiles from an Oppressor Mark II, which is an absolute ton. And it costs less, and you need the bunker to own it instead of the facility. So overall, I feel like the MOC is the better vehicle to own, and they virtually have the exact same function. There you have it. That's it for number 4. Let's move on to number 3. Next up at number 3, we have the Grotti X80 Proto. Now, my hatred for this thing is absolutely personal, but I can assure you that I'm not just doing this because I don't like this car. It's genuinely because this car is completely awful. Now, there's more supercars in Grand Theft Auto Online that are not worth buying. However, the X80 is one that I love to make an example of because this thing is absolutely horrible. And don't get me wrong, it looks kind of cool. It's very futuristic looking. It is kind of neat. This thing costs $2.7 million, and depending on which direction of the map you are traveling in, the car will have different performance, which is absolutely ludicrous. These little tiny spoilers on the back of it, the little flaps there, those affect the handling differently depending on which direction you're driving on the map. That information was found out by Bruffy1322 on YouTube. If you guys want to know more about this car and its brokenness, as well as some other broken cars, he has a really good video going over it. The Grotti X80 Proto for $2.7 million is a fundamentally broken supercar, and it is absolutely not worth buying in this game. Now, there's way more cars than just the X80. There's cars like the Cheval Taipan and things like that, which actually got a crazy buff with the Criminal Enterprises DLC, but they're still not really worth owning because they kind of suck. And there's a lot of supercars that suck in this game. I could make a whole list going over the worst supercars to buy, but the X80 just, it's kind of in a league of its own. For 2.7 mil and it's completely broken, I would avoid this thing at absolutely all costs, even though it is a pretty cool looking vehicle. So that's it for the Grotti X80 Proto. Let's move on to the next abhorrent vehicle. At number 2, we have the Buckingham Swift Deluxe. Now, I'm sure many of you guys knew this was coming. However, if you didn't know this was coming, oh my god. As you guys can see, the Swift Deluxe goes for $5,150,000 on Elitist Travel. Now, it is semi-gold plated, and it does have one unique feature. Actually, two, technically. Now, one of its unique features is it does allow you to drink champagne in the back of the helicopter while somebody else is flying you around, or of course, when it is parked. As you guys can see, I'm on the inside. I can also browse the web, so that's awesome. I couldn't possibly just pull up my phone and, oh. But of course you can drink champagne, which, I mean, gotta be worth the cost of $5.15 million for sure. Of course you can also shoot out of this thing, which, let's be honest, you're probably never gonna do that. Yeah, it's just not really worth it. Now, also for the low cost of $5,150,000, the Buckingham Swift Deluxe is able to take one more rocket than the regular Swift. That's right. This thing, because it is gold-plated and cost as much money as it did, can take... Oh. Now, unfortunately, I don't have anyone else here to test with me, so I can't show you guys for sure that this thing can even take one more missile. If you didn't know, vehicles in GTA, depending on if there's a player inside or not, can take more or less missiles. If there's a player inside, it can always take more. Nobody inside, it can take less. And that might be the case with the Swift Deluxe. However, it did just take one RPG, and I guess it is technically possible that it actually takes the same amount of missiles as the regular Swift. I guess be wary of that. Just please never buy this thing, like ever, actually, to be honest. So that's not the worst purchase in Grand Theft Auto Online. We got one more. Let's get into it. Of course you knew it was coming. This is, of course, the Luxor Deluxe. Now, the Luxor Deluxe goes for $10 million, which is absolutely horrible. However, of course, with this plane, you can sip champagne in the back of it, so obviously super worth it to own. Now, the Luxor, I do believe, has the same function as the Swift, where it can take an extra rocket for the $10 million that it costs, and I do believe that it is ever so slightly faster than the regular Luxor. However, I don't think that the price in between the Luxor Deluxe and the regular Luxor is worth paying, especially when you can just steal a regular Luxor from the runway without having to even call one. This thing is an absolute joke. You should never buy this in Grand Theft Auto Online. It's actually kind of a joke that Rockstar even added it into the game, because they absolutely should not have. Please never buy the Luxor Deluxe. It is not even a flex. Just avoid this thing at all costs. Anyway, guys, there you have it. Those are 10 things that you should never buy in Grand Theft Auto Online, or at the very least, things that you shouldn't buy until you are a super well-established player within the game. If you guys enjoyed this video, or if you learned something, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.